So let's quickly start our today's webinar. So here we are just going to discuss some interesting talk. So this webinar is majorly is going to focus on the cloud security part. So we will be discussing multiple emerging threats which has been get targeted over the year of 2025, and we will be discussing the APT groups and their tactics and techniques which they have been using for targeting the cloud service providers. And we are also discussing few Mitre cloud metrics, so we get to understand their tactics and techniques and the procedure, and finally we will be concluding the webinar. So let's quickly jump into our case. So as in case of cloud threat landscape, so as we know, the demand of the cloud has been constantly increasing. Like after the year of 2020, we get to see a tremendous growth of enterprise and organization has been constantly switching from their on-premise infra to their cloud infrastructure. So as it's get to be increase, the attacks which are targeting the cloud is also rapidly increasing. Mm. So l- our main focus is here to discuss about the threat landscape, which has been commonly used by the attacks group. So so here I just correlated with the Mitre techniques to get list of the threat which the attackers are constantly using. As in case of initial access, we get to see the attacks of phishing, is phishing valid account and exploit public facing application. It's get to seen as a most commonly techniques against the cloud for getting initial access. So attackers are constantly trying to target the cloud, like in case of phishing, like they are uh, constantly trying to target the enterprise to get initial access via the phishing. So same as it's a common approach in both on-premise, and it's been also following over the cloud. So but the risk which get associated over the phishing in the cloud is quite complex, because if a phishing is get happened over if the phishing is get targeted over the on-premise infra, like the user might can get drop the backdoor or something. But in case of cloud, the user can get access to the user account. So it's been quite serious as compared to the on-premises targeted phishing. So, and if you get to talk about the valid account, so the one and only the 80 percentage of the cloud initial access has been get targeted only via the valid account, because it's not like as if you're just been comparing with the on-premise, like we have multiple entry points, like the attacker or the adversary might try to find some vulnerability or weakness over the network or host machines, um, or the endpoints. Like there are multiple ways of entry points in case of on-premise, but in terms of cloud, the most targeted entry point is the valid account. So as you know, like in even in multi-cloud providers, the only way of accessing the cloud is by creating a user account or service account. So attackers are constantly targeting those valid accounts to get compromise it, get an initial access over the cloud service provider, and exploiting public facing applications. So it's another point of entry. Like we get to see there are a lot of services and resources which are being publicly hosted in terms of cloud. Like to give a simpler example, we can see the buckets for the storage services. It's been hosted publicly, and if like some of the compute engines is also get accessible publicly. So there are a lot of other entry points which the attackers are constantly targeting. So here we have a couple of use cases, like we will be discussing further, like in a very detailed way, for the valid account phishing and exploit. So it's just a landscape which what are all the majority of techniques which has been used by the attackers to get targeted by the adversaries. So as in terms of initial access, phishing, valid account, and exploit public facing applications, or the techniques which is commonly used by the adversaries. As in terms of execution, cloud CLI tool has been targeting. So it's might seems a bit unique because it's not been get mentioned over the mitre. Why it's been get mentioned here? Um, as in terms of enterprise perspective, many users has been get configured their uh, cloud credential in terms of CLI. So even the cloud providers are providing their custom CLI. We can get to download AWS CLI, Azure or GCP CLIs, and we can get configure our credentials so we can get to perform our uh, business operations. Yeah. So just assume a scenario, you get to compromise the adversaries or get to compromise a host machine, and they just get to found the compromised host machine as the access. Like the compromised host machine is get to be installed with multiple cloud CLI with a pre-configured credential. So attack adversaries are constantly abusing such a pre-configured credential over the host machine. So it's not like directly get targeting the cloud service providers, but by using the other way, getting compromised a host machine, just accessing the CLI with the pre-configured. So it will be get commonly used technique in terms of execution. So as in terms of privilege escalation, account manipulation is the techniques which has been commonly used where adversaries are creating a user account or the service account with the higher privileges, like um, or just they've been targeting the account with the higher privilege. So as in terms of privilege escalation, account manipulation is the commonly used tactics. So in terms of persistent, we get to see the attackers are targeting the external remote service and account creation. So external remote service in the sense so just assume another scenario like the EC2 or the compute service has been get hosted publicly and you get to exploit and get access over it. So users are trying to modify the SSH config to maintain a persistent over it. So this is one of the commonly observed adversarial technique where attackers are directly modifying the configuration of the SSH to get a stable persistent over it. As in terms of create account, so they are creating a backdoor or uh, another account which they are been using as the persistent over the cloud infrastructure. So as it's been get mentioned, so both the techniques has been commonly used for maintaining the persistent over the cloud. As in terms of defense evasion, users are directly impairing the defense to be more to be more clear so as in cloud, like we can get enable the service or disable the service. Even for monitoring the cloud infrastructure, we can manually set up our trials or diagnostic settings. But if the attacker get enough privilege, they are just disabling those monitoring and logging setup which get to be set over the cloud infrastructure. So as in discovery, so after getting access to the cloud, they are just started enumerating user group policies, roles to get identify vulnerable or highly privileged user account or identifying this sensitive information. And parallelly, we get to see the enumeration over the resources to like they are finding the S3 buckets and sorry the storage services, VM services. They are enumerating as much as services to identify the vulnerable or overly privileged services over it. So for the in terms of credential access, they are just targeting to find the credential which get to be hosted, like the one way which we are discussed, like the host machine. So over the host, if the user get to pre-configure the credential, the user can get directly dump the credential from over here on or some public buckets or some config file which get hosted over the GitHub. So there are multiple others ways the user can get to um, extract the credential over the cloud. So as in terms of collection or exfiltration, we get to see lot of use cases or the attacks techniques which get to be personally targeted for exfiltrating the sensitive data from the cloud infrastructure. And finally, there there might be another case the user can abuse the cloud, the compromised victim cloud infrastructure for resource hijacking or even encrypt, like performing a ransomware over the cloud. So the discussed here are the commonly observed techniques, which has been followed for targeting the cloud infrastructure. So these are all not specifically designed for a single cloud provider. So this has been applicable for multi cloud providers. So as we get to see, the common threat landscape, which has been simultaneously used by multiple adversaries. To be give a short summary, for initial access they will be using phishing, valid account, exploit public facing application. For the execution they are using the cloud CLI. For privilege escalation they are using the account manipulation. For persistent external remote servers, or they are just deploying their own backdoor as a high privilege user account. For defense evasion they are impairing the defense by disabling the logging and monitoring services. And the enumeration activity over the resources and the user. And for the credential access they are just collecting or identifying the unsecure credential. And they are performing various data exfiltration activity targeted over the storage services. For finally we can get to see lot of activity related to the resource hijacking and data encryption. So these are all the current threat landscape which we have been commonly observing by the adversaries, which they are get to be performed over the multi-cloud infrastructures. So here we are just discussing. Let's discuss some stats. Like as per the stats, we get to see 80% of companies has have been subjected to cloud security breaches due to some misconfigurations or some other vulnerable services or even the supply chain. So still now, like the emerging of cloud breaches has been constantly increasing. Uh, as in case of public cloud security incident, like the services which get hosted over the public, which has been targeted or been also simultaneously increasing. We are get to be noted that 62% of organizations are been constantly reporting for the cloud data breaches. So these are all the expected stats. So we have been observing such threats which are targeting over the cloud. So the demand of the cloud is not is get to be going to be a restricted one, because the emerging of AI. So this is going to open a new gateway for cloud intrusion, because many of the AI based deployment has been done over the cloud infrastructure, because people are not get to be preferring over the on premise due to the resource availability and other issues. So majority of the AI is being get deployed or configured over the cloud infrastructure. So we will be get to see a lot of threats which will be focusing on the multi-cloud infrastructures. So we have seen a generic cloud threat landscape. Now let's discuss major threats which with a very detailed information over it. So the listed are some few techniques like which are constantly observed in the enterprise level, as we get to see the IMDS credential access, resource hijacking, cloud specific ransomware, data destruction, and hijacking of Gen AI infrastructure. So we can discuss a very detailed information about it. So yeah. So before proceeding further, so if you have any queries or doubts, just hold your thoughts. At the end of the session, we can have a detailed discussion over it. Yeah, cool. Let me continue. So let's quickly discuss about the threats which get to be mentioned over here. So IMDS credential access. As you get to know over the cloud, the IMDS credential access has given a very huge impact. Uh, Still now it's been a threat, but there are some mitigations and prevention it's get deployed, but still it's been a most commonly targeted threat in terms of cloud. So to give a very detailed information about it, So IMDS credential access it's been generally targeting over the publicly hosted compute instance with as in terms of AWS. The adversaries are targeting the publicly hosted EC2 in Azure, the publicly hosted compute, and same for the GCP and for the multi-cloud. So here the publicly hosted VM machine is being targeted. So to give a very detailed explanation about the attack, so just assume that the enterprise has hosted a EC2 instance with the IMDS version 1, so which is been publicly accessible. So the most dangerous case when it's been get hosted with some web applications or some vulnerable applications, and if the application is can get to be executed with the SSRF or the command execution. So just assume a case we have get to hosted a EC2 which has been running with a vulnerable application of command injection. As in terms of EC2, by default, the cloud service provider has been get deploying the IMDS over the EC2 to get communication between the EC2 and the cloud providers. So attackers will constantly abusing such features. So what the attacker will be doing is, the attacker will constantly abuse some the um, vulnerability like the SSRF and the command injection to craft a malicious request targeting over to retrieve the metadata over it. So the metadata consists of very sensitive informations like the instance name, cloud accounts details, and even the secret key access key can be get retrieved from the extraction of IMDS targeted attacks. So this is the commonly observed threats. It's been many enterprises are still get to be struggling over this. Like many cloud providers has given some recommendation and suggestion like to shift to the IMDS v2 or other techniques. But monitoring and identifying such attack has its unique complex. To give a defensive suggestion like or give a defensive strategy to apply a defensive strategy over it, like it's not like we even in any of the logging and monitoring which get to be placed over the cloud, it's not easy to get log the metadata request and response. So we need to monitor the network activity which get associated over the applications. So we need to specifically monitor the request which is get to be requested for the metadata service. Then we will be blocking such IP because it might consider it as generally security issues. So we will be proactively monitoring the network logs, and we will be constantly monitoring the URI which the user or the attacker is trying to request. So based on that, we will be implementing some defenses like blocking the IPs and or applying some restriction over it. So this is the most commonly observed threats. So so, so as we mentioned, like the CWL is offering some practical labs over it. So if you're really interested, like how the attacks is been working or how the attackers are really trying to extract such information, I would recommend you to redirect to the Infinity platform where we have replicated or simulated the similar challenge like for the IMDS credential access. So you can get practically uh, perform a attack, or you can simulate the red team exercise over that particular website to see the impact which is get to be associated over it. So let me so I will let share the link and information at the end of the webinar, so you can have a practical simulation of the similar IMDS credential access. Yeah. So the second most commonly observed threat is been the resource hijacking. So majority of the as we know, like as I mentioned, like before, like many AI services are being get hosted over the cloud infrastructure. Not only the AI, so we get to see the enterprise have started storing their data or even creating their own infra over the cloud. So the resources are being constantly get to be up and running over the cloud infrastructure. Um, the main the how the attackers are not only just trying to compromise or just ransom the cloud infrastructure, but they are just using other techniques like resource hijacking for utilizing their resources for evading the bill payments. So just assume a scenario: the adversaries has successfully get compromised a cloud credential, and the compromised user has a privilege to create some resources like the storage or VM. So these the if the user, the compromised user have such permission, the user will up and run some resources. Like in such case, there is a one good case like the attacker or the adversary can create a VM and they can perform their own crypto mining operation. So if it is not get to be properly monitored, the resource creation and resource management, then it will be the attacker can uh, run their own crypto mining, and the bill and the resource payment will be mm, get falls under the enterprise. So it's not like they are just only targeting the users and just collecting the ransom or threatening the enterprise. They are also misusing such privileges or some utilizing the resources to get perform various malicious operation. So this particular operation is also get commonly observed. So we will see a similar use cases in our upcoming too. But yeah, so as in terms of threats, resource hijacking is considered to be a malicious one, because if an enterprise has been failed to monitor resource creation activity, then it's going to be a very it's going to create a very bad or a huge threat to our enterprise cloud infrastructure. So to applying a detection, so we need to have a proactive monitoring, and we need to get validate every resource creation with the associated user. If it's not get to be associated, we will be removing those resources. So this is the one and only and the best way for uh, tackling against the resource hijacking. So and the data destruction. So it is a very huge impactable one. So in cloud there is a major role which get to be played by the insider threats, or it's bit hard to differentiate whether the insider threat is performing such action or the account is get compromised or performing that malicious action. So these make attackers so a huge advantage. So they are just they are using multiple techniques to get compromise the credential, and if they have the relevant permission, the privilege management or the access management for the cloud users are been bit complex, and still it's been a messy process. Like enterprise are not get to be following a very structured and followed approach, because we get to see many user has been provided with a huge set of action. Even the access restriction will be a huge challenge in terms of cloud. Even they are been offering various services for restricting the access, but by default many users over the cloud infrastructure has given with a high privilege. Unless or until if it is not get compromised, then there is not an issue. But if there is a chance of, or if it is get compromised, then it's going to create a huge impact. So a single misconfigured permission can create a huge impact by deleting any resources which get to be deployed over the enterprise or the production infrastructure. So that's why managing the resource will be a bit complex, and the thread which get to be associated over the excessive privilege are still a high. Cloud specific ransomware. So this is the latestly emerging threat. So what the attackers are trying to do is they are just targeting the storage services, and they are just get to be encrypting those, and they are just demanding their ransom. So it's a way, it's a traditional way, like as you get to see over the enterprise, they are just ransoming the whole host machine or specific resource like the cloud storage and the object which get to be associated over it. They are just misusing the legit service like the KMS to get encrypting those files and demanding the ransom over it. So these are all the emerging threat. Like still we get to see with multiple APT groups are following such action for performing various ransom-based activity. So it's also been a common thread which we all get to be observing for the clouds from the adversarial threat landscape. So here comes the interesting use case. So hijacking the victim AI infrastructure. So it's one of the latestly observed kind of resource hijacking. So this approach is get to be similar to the resource hijacking. So as you know, like the payment and the billing of the cloud infrastructure are quite costlier compared to the on-premise, because if you accidentally get to run some services, then the cloud will be get constantly charging for the resources which you are been running, and if you are failed to maintain it, then you are going to get a bill or the payment for those resources which you are get to be running. So here is an interesting use case. So it's a very huge scenario. Let me explain in a way like it will be clear for you. So what exactly just happened is like as like the initial access, the attacker somehow got the initial access either by the phishing or just by the compromised credential. So once the attacker get to be have a initial access over it, they are just checking whether the user has appropriate permission to access the AI services. Like in this case, like the attacker is trying to access the bedrock of the Amazon for the AI implementation. So if the particular service has the required permission, they are just started running their module, like their malicious modules, or they are just utilizing their resources for up and running their own application. So to be more clear, just assume a scenario just that the enterprise has been using their AI unique, like their own AI module, like they have been get deployed. Okay, so the attacker has successfully got an initial access, and they are just deployed their own module, or they are just enabling another module. So they are just started creating a proxy application. So where they will be start collecting the request from their users, and they will be utilizing the resource of the configured module to get response back to it. So it's been constantly abused. Even like we have get to see in a scenario that a proxy application can used for various jailbreaking technique in the prompt injection. So the AI module which has been deployed over the cloud infrastructure has been abused by the external users. So if the infrastructure is get to be compromised, so there are a lot of security threats which are associated with this kind of use cases. So the one interesting case is the hijacking the victim AI infrastructure. So here we have seen the threats, the constantly observing threats in which is being targeted by the adversaries. So it's not like this is the so the listed are the specific services. So there are other few techniques which are also being constantly targeted by the attackers. But those are, so if you have a cloud infrastructure, you get to be more cautious in this particular threats. So if we need to talk about in terms of defense, so by default, many cloud providers are offering their own direct like own security services. As in terms of AWS, we have God Duty, other services, as same as goes for the Azure and GCP. Um, but what can like by but what makes a perfect detection or the prevention over such attacks? So from my perspective, I will be get to say a proper logging and monitoring setup over the multi-cloud infrastructure will get to achieve a proactive threat detection. So by creating a unique architecture for deploying the centralized logging and creating various use cases. So as I said, for creating a resource hijacking, so we will be proactively monitoring any resource creation activity like create bucket or create VM instance. So we can create our custom rule for proactively monitoring such threats. As in case of data destruction, it goes the same. So we will be monitoring those. There are some restriction like monitoring the cloud specific ransomware is quite complex if the resource has been hosted publicly. But for the others, like for the IMDS credential access, so we don't have a direct logging for IMDS monitoring, but by enabling the network logging over the VM instance, so we can effectively identify the malicious request or the IMDS based credential extraction. So the like by implementing a proper logging and monitoring over the cloud infrastructure can helps you to achieve a 80 percentage of defense, like the monitoring and identifying of a threat. Because in terms of blue teaming, identifying a threat, it's been a most challenging part. Because if not, we can't get to be preventing or preventing those threats. So the majority of the blue team relies on the identification of threats. So the same as the host for the cloud tool, the proper monitoring and logging is get to be required. So let's quickly have a small discussion about the APT groups which are been targeting over the cloud infrastructure. So the listed are the majority of the APT groups was constantly targeting their cloud infrastructure. So the one would be the Scatter Spider and the Cozy Bear and the Cosmic Wolf. So these are all the top three APT groups which are simultaneously targeting for the cloud-based intrusion or cloud-based attacks. So to give a small use case, it's been a very good use case. So there is one specific attack which has been get performed by the Scatter Spider, uh, so which is being investigated by the Eclectic IQ team. So they have performed a very good investigation by tracking down the Scatter Spider attack group. So there is Scatter Spider is been targeting the cloud infrastructure. So they have been their ultimate objective is to get demand the ransom by encrypting their cloud sensitive information. So this is their ultimate goal. So as I mentioned, Eclectic IQ team has performed a very good a very detailed investigation by tracking down their APT. So what exactly it's get to happen is, so by default, as we know, the scatter spiders are very good at generating a phishing or smishing or wishing based attacks. So the main advantage is get to relying on the phishing via initial access. So for the initial access, they get to follow the phishing based attacks. So they are just constantly the high privilege user like the global administrator or some highly privileged user, and they have generated their phishing. Even like if you are get to searching over the Google or other resources, you get to see Scatter Spider has a very good unique technique for bypassing the MFA. So somehow like they have got the initial access via the phishing. After they are just so initially they get to compromise one of the user with a higher privilege over the Azure infrastructure. Once they got the user access, they just start deploying the backdoor. So they have created the backdoor as the app registration. They generated the credential for that, and they have abused the cross tenant privilege. So if you get to recollect the midnight blizzard, so they are using a similar approach for the cross tenant, and they have deployed their uh, backdoor to get communicate with their adversarial tenant. So once they got to deploy the backdoor, they now have the higher privilege. So later they just started enumerating multiple resources which get deployed over it. Once they find a sensitive information, they have deployed their own they have encrypted those, and they are just demanding a high ransom. So it is one of the um, uh, very highly execution of attacks which get to be performed by the scatter spider. So you can even get to find the same use cases over the internet. So just if you get to see a scatter spider like ransomware targeting over the cloud, you will find a eclectic IQ blog, so where you can find the particular detailed information how their execution is get to happen. To give a summary, as I said, like they used phishing for initial access, and they have used the user account creation for their backdoor, and they have also performed a cross tenant based attacks, and they have encrypted the resource for the ransom. So similar goes for the other adversarial group. So the listed are some three major cloud targeted APT groups. So if you have if you need to get to perform a threat hunting over your cloud infrastructure, I personally recommended to get observe their uh, pattern and the techniques which they are get to be using over and just perform a hunt to get identify whether the infrastructure is get to be targeted or not. So here we come to our last part, like Mitre Cloud Matrix. So, like in my view, like the Mitre Cloud Matrix for the cloud is get to be a most underrated one. So we by default we get to know like the Mitre has get to create a very huge set of resources for the on-premise, but same they get to develop for the cloud infrastructure. So just redirect to the Mitre attack matrix. So they are listed is for the enterprise infrastructure. So we need to go to the matrices enterprise. If you get to, you will get to see the cloud-based matrix. So you will get a whole lot of visibility if you are more into, if you are planning to perform various um, offense like the red team assessment, or like if you are planning to perform, like if you are really excited to know what are all the techniques and tactics used by the adversaries, you can get to found the more whole lot of detail from here. So as we discussed for the initial access, the most commonly used technique for the cloud is been the external public facing phishing and the valid account, and for the execution we have seen the same. So we have the listed the landscape which we discuss are the most commonly observed techniques used by the adversaries to get compromised the cloud. So if you need to have a higher visibility, I will personally recommend it to look into the cloud matrix. I will be just get pasting over the command section. Yeah, so you can get to visit those. So here we just reached to the end of the webinar. Like so as we said, like the main objective of this webinar to get discuss some of the commonly targeted threats over the cloud infrastructure and the APT groups and their attack techniques. And in case of defensive strategy, as I mentioned, like my like it's been the it's been on my view of defense, like by implementing a proper logging, a centralized logging and monitoring can achieve a effective defense, because we can get to monitor a lot of use cases, lot of threat detection we can get to achieve by simply deploying a logging and monitoring. So we know like many cloud service providers are also giving a prevention strategy, but as you know the price it's matters. Like if the enterprise is ready to get to pay a huge get to invest a huge set of investment over the security, then it's okay. But even if you are a small or mid-sized enterprise, then even though like uh, you are you are get to using multiple cloud, and you need to get to achieve a security, then the effective way is only the logging and monitoring. So we will be the only way is to collect logs and just get to create various use cases, and you just need to get perform their investigation. So yeah, hope the webinar might help you to get update with the emerging uh, trends. So before moving further, so as I said, like if you're more into the cloud, and if you are been very if you're like to um, perform various attacks on something, or if you need to perform various direction, So we, the team CWL, has came up with a very interesting case like our Infinity platform. So let me quickly go there. So just type infinity.cyberwarfare.live. So I will be also sharing it over the chat. So we just need to redirect to the infinity.cyberwarfare.live. So we have implemented the SSO. You can just quickly log into it. So here we have provided real case use cases. So it's not only get focused on the cloud sec. We have DevOps security, Kubernetes, on-premise, and we are under constructing of many APT labs. So we have nearly 50 plus free labs which has been hosted already. If you are more into the red team, you can directly go to the offensive section, and we have multiple challenges which has been get simulated based on the real world cyber threat. So it's a multi-cloud based simulated lab. So you are not only going to find one cloud service provider, you get to see a lot of other cloud service providers like the AWS, Azure, and GCP. We will be integrating others too. So if you need to get practice the IMDS based attack, so I personally recommended you to visit the challenge. So we have given a very detailed description and a easy like a lab walkthrough. It's you can get to practice in a very interactive way. So you just need to start the lab will be get generated, and you can proceed exploiting as per its instruction. So here you can get to practice lot of labs. So yeah, I personally suggest you to get a look into our Infinity learning for your enhancement over the cloud security and in other services too. So let's for the like as we promised, like we are just planning to provide a giveaway of our blue team fundamental course. So to get to win a blue team fundamental, we have given a big challenge. So it will be a interesting use cases where uh, we have been get simulated on the real world basis. We have hosted a challenge over our Infinity. So so what you get to need to do to win a blue team fundamental is just log into the Infinity, just go to our defensive challenges. So under the defensive, you will be get to find the challenge name. So so the goal is to get we have so the goal is to get solve the challenges. So the top five users who's just completing the challenges will be get awarded with the blue team fundamental. So it's not just to complete it. So just perform an investigation. We have given a very interesting use case. So complete the investigation, just create a rough documentation or your way of investigation in a very detailed or a summarized way, and just post it over the LinkedIn, get taggers. So for the first five user who's been get posting or at get posting over the LinkedIn will be get the access over the blue team fundamental. So I will be repeating again. So the to win a blue team fundamental, just redirect to our Infinity. So you will be get solving the challenge named investigating the Azure blob deletion activity using the keyword secret. So just start the lab. So once you get to start the lab, you will get to have the access of our SIM. So you can just log in and you can start performing the investigation and to solve the lab. So we have the hint which is placed. So once you solve the lab, so just create a rough summary how what is your way of investigation, what is a recommended way for preventing such attacks. Yeah, so once you are just get to form the summary, just post it over the LinkedIn. Just don't forget to tag us. So the first five user who's been get posting that particular post will be get awarded over the blue team fundamental. So this is that so this is the giveaway which we have been planning for the webinar. So you will have a both experience over like how the investigation can get happened over the cloud providers. And so hope you enjoyed the webinar. So it's time for the Q&A. So you can clarify your queries, or if you have some suggestion or updation, you can get to yeah. So we are here to get to hear the questions and queries. Yeah, we can get to ask some you want a basic question, or you can like get discuss your use cases which you've been observed over the enterprise, so it can be any. Okay, cool. So we haven't got any queries. So yeah, I hope the webinar help you to track down the current threat landscape and some uh, informations for the detecting strategies over those. Like feel free to test our Infinity. Yeah, have a great day.